Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the But First She Failed podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. But before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about a little bit of a change that we're doing for the summer schedule, right? It's a little bit, I'm calling it the slow summer series. What does that mean? That just means that for the summer, we're going to go down on the rhythm of the podcast and it's going to be an every other week podcast, meaning we won't have an episode this upcoming Wednesday, but we'll be back the following Wednesday with a value packed episode. Why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing it for a few reasons. One of the reasons is this podcast is very much wellness based. And my whole goal with this is that we can all go after our goals. Even if the season doesn't look perfect, even if we don't have all the time in the world, we can still make progress towards our goals. And that's what I'm really aiming to do here. And given that it's a summer and every parent knows summer is a little bit crazy with kids being home and all that. And I don't have as much time to dedicate to the podcast, but that's okay. I'm trying to take it a slow during the school year, during the rest of the year. Life is so fast. And I think it's just healthy sometimes to just take a little bit of a slower rhythm to things, right? That being said, like I said, we won't have an episode this upcoming Wednesday, but we'll be back the following Wednesday. So don't go anywhere because this episode, this summer series, we're going to have the slow summer series. We're going to have so many great episodes that are value packed that you're not going to want to miss. So don't go anywhere. And come September, like I mentioned, come September, we are going to have just a bunch of, it's going to be a weekly podcast again, and it's going to have a lot of value packed interviews, a lot of updates and things that are coming up that I'm really excited to share with you guys. So don't go anywhere. We're still here. We're just going a little bit slower, but it's going to be value packed. My goal is also that every single time I put out an episode, it's not rushed, but it's a great episode with a lot of value so that you don't waste your time listening to a podcast and don't get anything from it. So anyways, that being said, I'm just super excited for this slow summer series and just go with the rhythm, go with the slower summer. I'm hoping that you do the same. I'm hoping that you get a little bit of rest and a little bit of a new rhythm and just that it's good for your wellness and it's good for your longevity, right? Because we've talked about this before. It's not a marathon. It's not a sprint. Sorry. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, right? So that's how it is going after all of our goals. And so anyways, I'm excited about this slow summer series. Stay with us. Every single episode that's going to come out is going to be value packed. I can promise you that. But now let's get into it. Last week, we talked about this whole concept of a growth mindset. And don't worry, if you haven't listened or you're like, what is a growth mindset? Don't worry. We're going to actually do a little recap in this episode. But if you listen to this episode and you get so much value out of it and you're like, oh my God, I love this concept of growth mindset, I want to hear more about it, I would encourage you to go back to the last week's episode because we really dive into what a growth mindset is, why it's so crucial, why I personally think it's the number one indicator of whether a person will be successful or not, because I dive into all of that, where the concept comes from, the history behind it, and just all things growth mindset. So go back and listen to that episode if you haven't yet. I just think it's so value packed. But today's episode is really fun because we are actually going to go into a little scenario things where I'm going to go into different scenarios that can happen in your career, in your business, in your work, in your personal life, in your relationships, different scenarios that can come up. And I'm going to show you what a growth mindset response, someone with a growth mindset, how they would think and respond to a situation versus someone with a fixed mindset and how they would respond to a situation. So I hope that by listening to these different scenarios, maybe you can see that you've lived through some of these scenarios and you can kind of see like, what was your response when this happened to you? Or maybe you can say like, oh my gosh, that's me. I don't want to be a fixed mindset person. Whatever the case is, I think this episode is going to be extremely helpful to you. And that's my goal. So now without further ado, let's get into it. Here's the episode of growth mindset versus fixed mindset and which one are you and why it's crucial to know which one you are. I think it would be helpful to do a little recap of kind of what the scenario is, right? What the definition is, if you will, right? The definition that we found, we had a few definitions in last week's episode, but the one that I thought was the most friendly, right, is that a growth mindset is the belief that one's abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication, hard work, perseverance. It's the idea that talents and skills are not fixed but malleable and can be improved over time with effort. People with a growth mindset embrace challenges, learn from criticisms, and view setbacks as opportunities for growth. This is so crucial. I actually talked about it in last week's episode, how I've had the opportunity to be around a lot of successful people in life, whether it's in different work scenarios, whether it is in personal life or just different scenarios, right? Whether they are friends, acquaintances, or just people that I've encountered and been in their presence, I've noticed or even read their books. Sometimes we have mentors that are not actual people in our lives, but they're people that maybe they're mentors through the books that we've read, right? Because we've been inspired by their work and their biographies and all that, right? And so one thing that I have seen in common is that 99% of these successful people have a growth mindset. And I dove into that whole topic in last week's episode, like I mentioned. So it's just, I think it's so crucial why we should develop a growth mindset. And I don't want you to miss out on your possible future and the things in your life, the possibilities, the purpose on your life, and all those things because you have a fixed mindset that's holding you back. Because the truth is, a fixed mindset will always hold you back in any and every scenario. It's going to keep you in a place longer than you want to stay. It's going to hold you back. It's going to keep you from going after different opportunities and maybe talking to people that you need to talk to, maybe networking, maybe moving across the country. There's so many ways that it could affect you if you have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, right? And you will never know, because maybe if you take a scenario and you would have approached it with a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, who knows where that could have led, right? Who knows what job could have opened up? Who knows what people you could have met? All the different things, right? So this is really crucial, right? So we are going to get into it. The first scenario is failure at work. So someone with a growth mindset, their perspective to they failed at work, whether it's a project, they were let go from a position. There's so many different ways that this could come up. Their approach if someone has a growth mindset, their approach to this would be something along the lines of, this didn't go as planned. What can I learn from this? That's a healthy growth mindset approach, correct? Whereas someone with a fixed mindset, if there's a failure at work, maybe the project didn't get delivered in time, they were reprimanded by their boss, or they were let go from a position, they're going to have a fixed mindset, which is, I failed, so maybe I'm not cut out for this. This specific example comes from my heart, very near and dear to my heart. Like I've said this so many times on the podcast before. This comes out of my own story of when I worked in national news. Eventually, there was a position that I was in that I was let go. I was fired from that position, which ultimately brought up all these feelings of, I failed, so maybe I'm not cut out for this. Was one of the many feelings that I felt in that season. And what that was so dangerous. Why? Because I started thinking, maybe I'm not meant to be a journalist. I don't care that I have a degree in this. I don't care that I've had great internships in this, that I've landed amazing jobs in this field, and I've had worked in this industry for many years. I started believing this lie that I failed, so maybe I'm not cut out for this. And I started really believing that I'm not cut out to be a journalist, that I wasn't cut out to be a journalist. And that held me back for so many years, where I started looking in different directions, started looking in different career paths, trying to find something else, because I believed that lie, because I had a fixed mindset, right? So the scenario of failing at work was very near and dear to me, and it affected me because I had a fixed mindset. But had I had a growth mindset, this didn't go as planned, but what can I learn from it? I do have a 5-step framework of how to overcome a failure. And eventually I did get to this point of, this didn't go as planned, but what can I learn from this? I eventually got there. But in the beginning, I didn't feel this way, and it held me back. And that's the thing about fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. It can hold you back way longer in an area that you don't want to be in, way longer than you expect to. So that's why it is crucial that we develop these growth mindsets. Another scenario, which I think is a little bit funny, is getting critical feedback. So someone with a growth mindset will say this is hard to hear, but it can help me get better. Whereas someone with a fixed mindset is, this feedback means I'm not good enough. So they internalize the thing. They don't want to get that feedback. And remember, feedback is so crucial, especially constructive criticism, because it helps us grow. If we're not open to it, we're really locking ourselves in a little box and not getting help. And we're kind of, repeating the same ideas and thoughts, and really to ourselves, right? So it is so important that we develop this growth mindset. Why was I laughing? And why was I saying that I'm critical of what I'm saying in this episode? Because I'm going to use myself as a real life example, as I always do in this podcast. It's about being real. So I got a review a few months ago. I actually got this in February, and this is a perfect example of getting critical feedback and how you can approach it with a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. So the podcast review, and you're going to see why, said warranted 5 stars. This is a review that was written in February. Like I said, she wrote, I never leave reviews, but I always listen to podcasts. I'm changing what I listen to, and my self-love is growing stronger. Podcasts like this are the reason and she put new fave podcast, exclamation mark. I only want to add that I still want to give it 5 stars, but every other word is right. Almost to the point where I can't listen anymore, but I still continue because I still want to give it 5 stars. I don't know, maybe it's just me, right? So she put a little quip there, and oh gosh. So guys, when I heard that, I was initially I felt bad. Of course it's like, oh, that stings. Like, gosh, I say right all the time. I didn't even realize it. But my growth mindset approach kicked in, and I started thinking, that's okay. What does that mean? That means that I need to improve as a speaker. I'm growing. I'm still growing. We're all growing. I'm growing as a speaker. I'm challenging myself. So that made me realize, oh my gosh, I say this one word too much. I need to start being more mindful and intentional about the words that I use, and not ramble, right? See, I just said it again. So this is something that I'm going to be more intentional and be more mindful about in the future. So I thought this was great, because the growth mindset is, ouch, that stings, but I'm going to get better and I'm going to learn from this, versus someone with a fixed mindset. They're going to really take that really personally and believe that they're not good enough. So they might take it, someone with a fixed mindset might think, I shouldn't have a podcast. I shouldn't be a speaker. I shouldn't do any of these things because I stumble on this word too much. So that's kind of the difference. So if you've ever been in a scenario where you feel like you've gotten some critical feedback and you really felt that it meant that you weren't good enough, then that might mean that you are operating in a fixed mindset. Another example is comparing yourself to others. So, if you have a growth mindset, how do you respond to this? You're going to respond to, I'm inspired by her journey. What can I learn from it? When you're comparing yourself to others, it's going to be a healthy comparison. It's not going to be a nasty comparison where you're beating yourself up and all that. Someone with a fixed mindset, they're going to view someone's success differently. They're going to say, she's ahead of me. I'll never catch up. And that would be a fixed mindset, something that would be an unhealthy approach to seeing someone that's winning, right? Comparing yourself, but in a negative way. So I have an example of this in my life where there's a former colleague of mine that she has a podcast as well. And so she has a very coveted role in national news, and she's got a lot of followers. When I mean a lot, I mean a lot, hundreds of thousands of followers. And I remember when she started her podcast around the same time I started my podcast, and her podcast eventually got bought out by a network recently. And so I was actually inspired. I was like, wow, that's cool. Like, if she can do it, I can do it too. It made me inspired to learn more about how to do that, right? Versus if you have a fixed mindset, you can really start thinking, wow, there's no way I don't have a million followers that will, you just put yourself behind, and it really takes away your energy, it takes away your focus, and that's not something that you want to do, right? So that would be someone with a fixed mindset versus a really healthy growth mindset, to be inspired by others' journey. So if you read other people's books, or you see other people winning online, or people in your life and you see them winning and you're inspired by them, that's a good thing. That might mean that you have a growth mindset, right? And when you say, wow, that's so great, what can I learn from this person? What can I learn? What can I take away? That's a great thing. That means you have a growth mindset when it comes to that, versus thinking, I'm so far behind, I can never, it's too late to enter this industry. All those things, those are fixed mindset, right? Another one is conflict in relationships. Let's go there. So another one for conflict of relationships, someone with a growth mindset, is this is uncomfortable. Well, we have a chance to grow together. So this comes to romantic relationships, friend relationships, all kind of relationships, right? This is what they would see, versus someone with a fixed mindset. They would say, if we argue, maybe we're not compatible, which is really unhealthy to think. And I've been there a lot. I've struggled with this, where thinking that if I argue with someone, if I disagree with someone, that just means we're not compatible. We're not meant to be friends. Or even with my husband, oh my gosh, where, you get into an argument and you think, oh my gosh, we're not compatible. When that's not the case, usually it's just that you have different points of views, and it's okay. It's uncomfortable, but you learn and you grow. And that's a healthy approach to conflicts in relationships. Another thing is, for example, when it comes to your career, maybe you're starting a new role. This is a scenario. So if you are starting a new role and you have a growth mindset, you can approach that whole scenario of starting a new role as, there's so much to learn. I won't get it all right at first, but that's okay. So you give yourself a lot of grace. You say that that's okay. There's a lot to learn, and you're really healthy with your approach to starting a new role. Where someone with a fixed mindset would really walk into a scenario like that and say, I need to prove myself immediately. If I mess up, they'll regret hiring me. I've been there before, where I get on a new job. I know nothing about it. I obviously have to learn, because no one comes in learning any role. You have to learn the systems. You have to learn the company. You have to learn the culture, the politics. There's a lot of things that go into starting a new role. But if you have a fixed mindset, then you're going to think, oh my gosh, this is a reflection of me. I don't want to mess up at all, because then they'll regret hiring me. And that is such an unhealthy place to be. Another one is not getting a promotion that you want at work, right? So this is probably something that's happened to me. I'm sure it's probably happened to you. It's probably happened to someone that you know. It's very common, right? Someone with a growth mindset, they would say it as, I didn't get it this time. What can I do to improve to be ready for next time? Whereas someone with a fixed mindset would see it as, if I were good enough, then I would have been promoted. Maybe I've hit my ceiling. So they kind of say, like, this is the last role for me. I don't think I can go up in my career. That's how they see not getting a promotion. They see it in a very negative context, right? Another thing is seeing a peer succeed faster. This happens to all of us in the workplace and in our businesses in all areas. This can even happen in personal lives. Mommies that are thriving, all areas, right? People in your family, friends, all things, seeing a peer succeed. So someone with a growth mindset, that the way they would approach it is, I can celebrate her and still be proud of my own pace. Whereas someone with a fixed mindset would see it very differently. She would see it as, she's ahead of me, I must be doing something wrong. So they're already comparing themselves, saying there must be something wrong with me. Why are they ahead of me? And it's, again, very negative, and that can keep you stuck and really hinder your growth in a lot of areas. Another thing that you can see is leading your first team. So this can happen, in the workplace when you're starting to and get into that managerial space. Leading your first team or becoming a leader. Someone with a growth mindset can see it as, leadership is a skill I can develop. I'll grow with experience and feedback. So they see it as like, I'm going to go into this role. I'm going to learn. Everyone learns to be a leader. It's a totally okay thing. That's their healthy approach, right? Someone with a fixed mindset will say, I'm not naturally confident or assertive. Maybe I'm not leadership material. I've been there before, where I've thought in the past where I can't lead people because I'm not naturally assertive, or I'm not as confident as I used to think leaders were. Another thing is pitching a big idea, right? This could be at work, right? Even if it doesn't land perfectly, it's a chance to learn and be seen. This is someone with a growth mindset. They go into the room and they're going to pitch a big idea, and they're like, maybe it's not going to land perfectly. Maybe I'm not going to say it perfectly, but at least chance to be seen. And I'm going to learn and grow and be seen with this, right? Versus someone with a fixed mindset, they would see it, if I mess up the pitch, I'll embarrass myself and lose credibility. I can attest to this. I remember specifically, there was this one time when I worked at the news magazine startup that I worked for in TV. And I remember that there was this really cool idea for a segment. It was for millennials, like content was all for millennials. We were Gen Zers. Now Gen Zers are younger, that generation. It's when we were the same age as Gen Zers now. And I remember that essentially, like, there was this really cool concept that I came up with for an idea for a segment. I remember that they were going around asking people for ideas, and I stayed quiet. I did not share that idea because I felt that I felt, if I mess up on this pitch, I'll embarrass myself and I'll lose credibility. And so I was terrified, right? And I became quiet. I didn't speak up. I didn't say that pitch. And I remember a few days later, there was another opportunity, and I finally did share a pitch. I did share a pitch that I had that I wanted to share about a segment idea. And I remember that it didn't land so well. It didn't get that much of great feedback from it. No one really said like, oh, this was great. It was just kind of like lingering in the air. And I remember as I walked out, this colleague of mine that had he actually went to Stanford, and he kind of came up to me and he was like, hey, that's a really cool idea. I really like that. I think we definitely should do, like, that was a really cool idea. I really hope that we do something like that. And to me, that meant the world. It like validated in that moment. It validated that my idea was great. It just, because maybe it didn't land for that other person or the other people in the room, doesn't mean that it wasn't a great idea. And it really helped me in that moment know that even if people don't say that they love your idea, even if other people don't speak up, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your idea, right? So that is an example of having a fixed mindset, where I definitely had a fixed mindset. I somehow in that season broke through that fixed mindset and spoke up one time in that scenario. And what I got from it was that at the end of the day, when I walked out of that room, when that colleague said, hey, that was a really cool idea, I really like it, I hope they do it, that really meant a lot to me. So pitching a big idea, you can either have a growth mindset or you can have a fixed mindset. Another one is changing careers or industries. This one's big. I feel like so many people I talk to every single day, I'm talking to former colleagues or friends or sorority sisters or, mommies at my son's school. All the time, I'm just talking to different people. And every single day, I feel like I'm encountering people that are changing careers or industries or taking a power pause or doing something, correct? And I just think it's so common. And for example, growth mindset is one example of that. If you have a growth mindset and you are approaching this whole concept of, changing careers, changing industries, the thought process would be, I might be new, but I'll bring transferable skills and I'm ready to grow. So that is a very healthy approach. When I see someone with like that attitude of like, let me ask questions, let me learn, let me get into something, I think, wow, they have a growth mindset. Versus someone with a fixed mindset, they're going to think, I'm too far behind. I'll never catch up to people who've been doing this for years. So they won't go into a new industry that they love. They'll never do the thing. And that makes me really sad. This actually reminds me of a friend of mine from a friend from college. I remember my freshman year, not my freshman year, I guess my freshman year of adulthood, 1 year out of college, when I had moved to Miami and I was working for Univision. I went back to Chicago and I went to a dinner with a bunch of friends from college. And I remember this one friend of mine from a dance group that I was in, he had mentioned how he started asking me about Univision and asking me about TV and all these different things. And I remember sharing with him, he at the time was working for Chase, he was working in finance, he had gone to school for business and all the things. And I remember he just had all these questions and was like, man, I want to move. I think I want to move to LA and all the things. Fast forward, he ended up doing it. He ended up leaving his job at Chase back then and his degree in business and going to be, I think, a production assistant or something in LA for different shows. I think he worked for Big Bang Theory. And now he's like the right hand man for, what's her name? For Abbott Elementary. I forget that actress's name, but she's huge. The show is huge. It's huge. And the fact that he is right there and he's on the red carpet at all these cool events and doing all things. Why? Because he took a leap. He decided to go for something instead of thinking, this, I'm too far behind. I didn't go to college for this. I didn't go to undergrad. I don't have a degree in this. Look at my friend. She moved across the country. She did this thing. Instead of thinking that and thinking I'll never catch up to people, he sucked it up. He was like, I don't want to do this forever. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do something else. And he moved to LA and now he's working for an amazing show that gets it gets a lot of awards. It's really well known. And he is the right hand person of this incredible writer, celebrity, the creator of the show. And how cool is that, right? So that is, changing careers and industries. Another one is starting your own business. Another example, someone with a growth mindset it was going to think, I don't know everything yet, but I can figure it out step by step. So that is someone with a growth mindset with idea of starting a business. Someone with a fixed mindset is going to say, I'm not ready. I need to have it all figured out before I even try. So they don't even go after it. They don't even try. They just feel like they've already disqualified themselves from starting a business because they just feel like they don't know all the things. So how are they going to start a business? And so often do I run into people that are working in the corporate space and they hate their jobs. They hate their teams. They hate their jobs, but yet they won't leave because they feel like they have no idea how to start a business instead of just, starting it on the side calmly and quietly and, peacefully doing their thing, hustling on the sides on weekends and figuring it out. They don't even start. So that is definitely a very well known and very well seen example. Another one is receiving a harsh performance review. So, someone with a growth mindset would see this is painful, but it's valuable data to improve from. While someone with a fixed mindset might see it as I must be terrible at my job. I'm not cut out for this. So, this is again that same idea of I'm not meant for this. I'm not cut out for this. I'm, just bashing themselves, correct? Another one is being the only woman of color in a room. This is something that has come up for me in different moments too, being Latina and being Hispanic and being in different rooms. Sometimes it's like, wow, do I deserve to be here? All the different things, or maybe socioeconomic class. I remember when I worked for one of the networks that I worked for, a lot of the kids came from very affluent parents, affluent backgrounds, and I went to Ivy League schools and just feeling like I wasn't able to be in the room or I didn't have I shouldn't have been in the room, right? And so I understand this one very much. And so growth mindset to this is I deserve to be here. This is someone with a growth mindset. When they are being the only woman of color in a room, they'll tell themselves, I deserve to be here and I can own my space while continuing to grow. Whereas someone with a fixed mindset, which is where I used to be, would say something to themselves like, I have to prove that I belong. One mistake and I'll confirm their doubts. So they're always thinking everyone's looking at me. They don't think I should be here. I need to prove my worth. I need to prove something. So they have all this added pressure that's probably sabotaging their work, probably sabotaging their creativity, the projects, all their things because of this insecurity, because of this fixed mindset. So you can see how it's really probably going to hold them back. They're probably going to stumble because they feel like they have to prove their worth. Really unhealthy. Another one is burnout from overworking, which we talked about why we're doing the slow summer series this summer, to avoid burnout, right? Growth mindset. Someone with a growth mindset will see this as I need to grow in how I manage energy, not just effort. So how do I manage my energy? That's something that like I said, I'm looking into, like, how am I going to manage my energy? I have so much energy. I go full throttle most of the year. And I decided that it's healthy to go a little bit slower in the summer. And that's what's healthy. And that's what's going to help me be so strong come the fall, because I'm going to have taken kind of a little bit of a break, not a full break, but just a little bit slower rhythm that's going to help me have the stamina to go forward and do what I have to do in the fall. And but someone with a fixed mindset, they're going to believe this. And I've struggled with this so often, which is if I slow down or say no, I'll fall behind and lose everything I worked hard for. So this was a lie. When I take it back, if you've been listening to the podcast, you probably know that I took a 1-year hiatus, which is unheard of in the podcast world. When I had my daughter, Sophia, I was like 9 months pregnant and I recorded an episode and I just really felt so strongly that God was telling me to pause on that podcast for a while, right? For a season. I needed to go on maternity leave. Why did I leave the corporate space? Why did I go into this world of being an entrepreneur if I couldn't even give myself that privilege, if I had to work around the clock? And I knew I was going to have the mental space or capacity to really show up the way that I wanted it to. And I remember that, I paused. I said I did this crazy thing of pausing. And I was so happy that I did. If you go back to the first episode of when I restarted the podcast and relaunched in January, I believe the first episode came out. January, yeah, January, February. I talk about how I had all these health issues that came up, and it would have been so unhealthy for my mental health. My delivery process and story was not, it was very, there was, I had to go to the hospital. There were a lot, I had to go back to the hospital after I was discharged with my baby. There were a lot of things that came up because of preeclampsia. And so all that being said is that I had this lie in my head that if I slow down, I didn't want to stop the podcast at the time because I had this lie if I slow down or say no, I'll fall behind and lose everything that I worked hard for. But friends, I want to tell you that when I came back to this podcast after being gone for a whole year, while I was gone, the podcast was still building on itself. I was still getting downloads. I was still getting emails. I was still getting hit up. I was still getting, things were still moving. Even though I hadn't touched the podcast for a year, people were still listening. People were still finding it. People were still leaving reviews. And actually, when I came back and I relaunched the podcast back in the beginning of this year, I had so many more downloads than when I had left, like on a weekly basis. And so all that to say is that there's power in pausing. There's power in not burning out. This perfect growth mindset of I need to grow in how I manage my energy, not just effort, but in versus like this fear of slowing down because you'll fall behind and lose everything you worked hard for. I learned that that's not the case. Sometimes we have to doing what's healthy leads to better results in the overall picture. Yes, it may kind of hinder something. Some certain things may slow down. I'm not saying that that's not going to happen, that can happen, but I am saying that definitely it's going to be healthy overall, right? So if you want to do this thing long term, then take some breaks, the rhythm a little bit more manageable whenever you can, however you can, however the season looks like. There's going to be seasons where you can work harder. There's going to be seasons where you can work less, but just stay at it, right? So that's burnout from overworking. Another one that I thought was really important that I didn't say was imposter syndrome moments, right? This is something that I've dealt with a lot. I talk about it in the podcast intro, I believe. This is so near and dear to my heart because I know so many brilliant women that still deal with imposter syndrome because maybe they're the only Latina in their space as a doctor, in their school or in the Ivy League university that they go to, or maybe they're the only woman of color in their business or their industry, man or, female. And so I've seen this just all over the place, this imposter syndrome moments. And someone with a growth mindset, they're going to see it as I feel this way because I'm growing beyond my comfort zone. So that's a healthy approach to having those feelings of imposter syndrome. Whereas someone with a fixed mindset is going to say, I don't belong here. They'll find out I'm a fraud. Again, that is, I know I've already said this a few times, but that is so what I felt when I was at that one network where everyone was, everyone was super established in their, how do I say this? They were either established in their careers, like they had a lot of followers on social media, they had famous parents, they had parents that were CEOs and doctors, and they had gone to Ivy League universities. And so I started feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't belong. I shouldn't be here because I don't have those things. And so I really started to believe this lie that I'm not supposed to be here. They're going to find out that I'm a fraud. Why am I here? Whereas something you can do to combat that is really start looking at the things like I should have in that moment stopped myself and stopped those lies and been like, no, you went to college, you got your degree. Even if you didn't go to college, that's still okay. That doesn't mean anything. But I'm saying in my specific case, I should have said, I went to school for this. I got a degree in this. I was hired for a reason. I have something to give here. I have something to contribute. I have 5 years under my belt in this industry. I've learned a lot. I've grown. I have talents and I can do this. Right. That's a healthier approach to this, as opposed to believing that you are a fraud and believing these lies. And really comparison, it comes down to comparison. So that is really the imposter syndrome. If you have a fixed mindset, you're really going to believe I don't belong here. They'll find me out as a fraud. Whereas the healthy way is that I feel this way because I'm growing out of my comfort zone. And that's okay. That's something that I recently experienced with my husband and I. We are part of an athletic club. Our family is part of an athletic club. And that is something that one of my friends, shout out to Julie, if you're listening, one of my friends, she's always had an athletic club membership. And I used to think, oh my gosh, that's such an expensive thing. Why would you do that? Just go to a gym that's a little bit less, more affordable, if you will. And she's like, no, there's so many benefits. You can work from here. You can do all the things. And I remember when we signed up for the athletic club that we go to, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I don't belong here. Everyone here is rich. Everyone here is very successful. I had those feelings start to like bubble up, if you will, in me. And I started thinking like you're in the season, you're a stay-at-home mom, you don't have your thriving career, all these things, like these like lies wanted to come pop up. And it's just because I was growing out of my comfort zone. So what happened 6 months later, 9 months later, now I'm owning that. I love going there. I use it all the time. I use it today to get some work done. I use it all the time because it's such a hack. It helps us tremendously with working out, getting, a little bit of childcare. I can do cafe meetings. I had a meeting today with some former colleagues and it was great. It's great. It's a great asset to have. And so I don't see it as like, oh my gosh, just unnecessary expense. I see it as like, this has really helped me supercharge my career and what I'm going after. And it's a great investment. And it's actually been so helpful to us that now I'm like, this is more than worth the value of what it is, of what the membership is. That being said, it's just because I just want to explain to you kind of a story that there was a moment there that I was growing out of my comfort zone and I was starting to believe these things, but I pushed through it. And now I'm like, no, I belong here. I'm meant to be here. There's nothing like I'm the same and equal as everyone here. And I've really grown into that. And I think that that's so happens in all areas of our life, in jobs, in relationships and friendships, and in all areas. But let me know what you think. Did you find value in this episode? Was that helpful? I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, please in the comments below, please make sure to let me know. Did any of these scenarios stick out to you? Were you like, oh my gosh, that's me? And whether if in the fixed mindset or the growth mindset, in either scenario, I would love to hear from you and have a conversation there in the comments on our YouTube channel. And as a reminder, if you don't follow us on YouTube, go ahead, and you do like watching YouTube, go ahead and follow us there. You're going to get the video content of this podcast there. We're looking to grow there, and I'm excited. So thanks so much for joining us. Hope to see you next time, which will be in 2 weeks as we go into our slow summer series, which we're going to be every other week just for the summer. But we will be back in 2 weeks with an amazing episode with a lot of value. So let me know your thoughts. I hope this helps you. Let me know about fixed mindset versus growth mindset, also on the DMs and IG. Would love to hear from you. Hope to see you next time.